This short reflection, I thought it might be a good idea to look at a verse that's been on my mind for some time. And the verse in connection is John chapter 6, verse 51. This is reading from the NIV. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. This verse has just really speaking to me personally. A lot of this is just personal observations or just personal thoughts. So I just thought it was astounding that Jesus could speak of himself using a metaphor like bread, and also speak of himself as being the living bread, and that whoever eats this bread will live forever. This bread is my flesh. And then the part that really spoke to me is the part where it says, which I will give for the life of the world. Life of the world. Life. What life? Human life? Just human life? Or all life? I think it must have ramifications. I think it must be profound. I think it can't just be human life. I think it involves all of life, because Jesus is life, and he's really alive. He's the highest life. He's the highest kind of life. And when you get his life living in you, it transforms you, it changes you, it makes you different. It turns you into another kind of person. Which then brought me on to a related verse in the same chapter, John chapter 6, 35. We can see 35 as being the context for verse 51, where Jesus declares that he is the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry. Whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Now we know that this can't just simply mean physical hunger or physical thirstiness, because we all know, and even in our own experience, at different times we've been hungry, different times we've been thirsty. But when it comes to our spirituality, when it comes to our spiritual life, in Jesus, we can have our satisfaction. In Jesus, we will not be spiritually thirsty, and we will not be spiritually hungry. I like that Old Testament verse in Isaiah, which to me relates to John 6:35 and John 6:51, where in Isaiah prophesies about a time when the people of God will no longer be spiritually hungry and no longer spiritually thirsty. So that Isaiah could say, they will neither hunger nor thirst, nor will the desert heat or the sun beat down on them. He who has compassion on them will guide them and lead them beside springs of water. Now we know that in Isaiah, or at least this is my feeling about Isaiah, that Isaiah is working on so many dimensions, because it feels to me that Isaiah is literally saying that the people of God won't be physically hungry anymore, and they won't be physically thirsty anymore. But that also, on another level, neither will they be spiritually hungry, and neither will they be spiritually thirsty. So that when we go further in Isaiah has God saying the following: my servants will eat, but you will go hungry. That is, those people who are not of God, who don't know God, who don't want to know God, they will go hungry, because they'll be spiritually thirsty. They'll be spiritually hungry. My servants will drink, but you, if you don't know Jesus, you'll be spiritually thirsty. My servants will rejoice, but you will be put to shame. You, meaning those who reject Jesus Christ. Another related verse, Luke 51:53. He has filled the hungry with good things, but has sent the rich away empty. Do you know your spiritual hunger? Do you know that you are spiritually hungry? Are you aware? Are you looking for something to believe in and you don't know what it is? It's interesting that people are hungry. They are spiritually hungry, but they don't know what it is. They don't know what they're hungering for. It's spiritual hunger. It's spiritual thirstiness that only Jesus can provide. That's why Jesus can say, never again will they hunger. Never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat down on them, nor any scorching heat. That's a bona fide promise that Jesus makes. So that, speaking further, in the Beatitudes, Jesus can speak of those who are hungry being blessed. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Do you know your hunger for spiritual realities? Do you know that you hunger for Jesus? Do you know that only Jesus can fill that spiritual void in your life? Because therein is the problem. Jesus is the answer, but we have difficulties accepting that spiritual reality. And that's a common problem, I should say. We know that at the time of Jesus, the Judeans began to grumble about him because he said, I am the bread that came down from heaven. You see, in the time of Jesus, the people around him, the Jewish people of that time, the Judeans, the Jews at that time, they grumbled. Many of them grumbled. They could not accept what Jesus had said about himself. They had real difficulties. And that really is the problem, isn't it? That today so many of us are spiritually hungry, spiritually thirsty, need that void in our life filled. Fill it with alcohol or drugs or some other remedy other than Jesus, hoping that it might satisfy us, when clearly it cannot. And the only thing that can satisfy is Jesus. Hence, that's why Jesus can say, He is the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. Jesus today has demonstrated his love by dying for us at Calvary, so that we can have access to God and have access to that eternal life that brings supreme satisfaction and glory. Today, if you hear God's voice, you shouldn't harden your hearts.